we prepare for Christmas, we're going to be thinking quite a bit about the story of a young girl, a woman, a lady called Mary, the peasant girl who was called by God to be the mother of his son, to be the mother of Jesus. And to help with that, we're going to be looking at the story of another peasant girl, one who lived centuries before Mary, a woman called Ruth. And as we look at her story and the characters around her, we will see some interesting parallels between her life and that of Mary, and the significance of the son that she was going to have. We find her story, unsurprisingly, in the book of Ruth. And I'm going to be looking at the first 2 chapters this morning. Heather will explore the last 2 chapters on the last Sunday in December. And Mary will pop up again and again over the different things we're planning over this month. Incidentally, there's a lot of fascinating questions that pop up when you read slowly and carefully through the book of Ruth. It's just 4 chapters. It's quite short. It's sort of, I don't know, maybe a quarter of the way into your Bibles. And I read it through a week or so ago as I was thinking about this. We're not going to have the time to get into all the questions that this book raises. So please do find a bit of quiet time and a coffee, other drinks are available, and read and reflect on the book for yourself. So some of you will be familiar with the story of Ruth, but others won't. So let me quickly summarize what happens in this book. The story takes place roughly 1,100 years before the birth of Jesus. So a long time ago. Famine hits a village called Bethlehem. There's a man called Elimelech, his wife Naomi, and 2 sons who were living there. And they leave for a nearby country called Moab, where there's food. They realize they're hungry there, so they'll go to Moab. Elimelech dies, and his 2 sons marry 2 women from Moab, one called Orpah and one called Ruth. 10 years later, the 2 sons also die, leaving the 3 women as widows. Naomi goes back to Bethlehem, and Ruth goes with her. Ruth meets a wealthy landowner, Boaz, when she's working in his fields. Boaz first becomes interested in her story and then infatuated by her. He marries her. They have a son, Obed, who becomes the grandfather of King David, the greatest king in their history. And as we look at this story in a bit more detail, we will see how God is working out his purposes in her, a willing human being, just as he did again centuries later in Mary. We're going to pick up the story partway through chapter 1 as Naomi prepares to return home as a widow. And on the screen there, you can see an indication of the journey she's going to take, a journey of about 50 miles from over here up to Bethlehem. So that's where she's going to go, and Jan is going to come and read that account to us. Thanks, Jan.
Get my glasses on. So it's Ruth chapter 1 from verse 6. When she heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, Naomi and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she'd been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show kindness to you as you've shown to the dead and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud and said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who would become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I'm too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has gone out against me." At this they wept again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law's going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. So the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them, and the women exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning.
Thank you, Jan. Just want to pull a few things out from that story. And the first thing that struck me was Mary's commitment. Mary? The first thing that struck me was Ruth's commitment to her mother-in-law, even to the extent of being willing to leave her own gods behind, her own family, all that she'd grown up to understand, and to commit herself to Naomi's God, the God of Israel. And there were a lot of reasons for her not to do it. First of all, her mother-in-law was saying, "Go home. Don't come with me. I've got nothing to offer you. If you come with me, I can't promise you anything." And Orpah, one of the young women, hears this and understands the sort of sense in what Naomi is saying, and goes home. And as she does that, Naomi, maybe thinking she's won that battle, turns to Ruth and says, "Go with her. Don't stay with me. Go back with your sister-in-law." She didn't quite say, "I don't want you," but there's not a lot of encouragement. And there was even less reason for Ruth to want to commit herself to Naomi's God. Naomi herself, the one who you would have thought would be wanting to speak about her God and to encourage others to follow him, she was bitter because of the way that she perceived God had treated her with the loss of her husband and her two sons. So lots of reasons for Ruth to simply stay in Moab. But Ruth rises above all of this and simply states her total commitment to her mother-in-law, including to her culture, her society, and her God. And we're not told why. Was this because of the way in which she loved her mother-in-law? Was it a sense of responsibility for Naomi that Ruth had taken on as she married Naomi's son? Or was it something else? We don't know. But Ruth comes across as totally willing to sign up for this journey, this physical journey of 50 miles, but much more significantly, this journey into a new life, into a new context, a new culture, a new religion, without knowing where it would take her, without knowing what it would cost her, and without knowing how it would work out. There was something in Ruth that said, I'm going to do this. We see a similar response in Mary, 1,100 years later, as she responds to an angel who's come and dropped some bombshell news on her that she was going to have a son, and this son was to be the Son of God. And Mary says, there's a bit of conversation beforehand. Mary asked some questions, trying to understand how that was possible while she was still a virgin. But after that conversation, she simply says, I am the Lord's servant. May your word to me be fulfilled. She simply commits herself fully and completely to God's call on her life, not knowing what it would involve, not knowing what it would cost. Not knowing that that cost would involve 33 or so years later, standing and watching that son whom she loved being humiliated and tortured and dying on a cross. Not knowing that that was the pain that she would have to endure. Because this is what God wants of me. This is what I will do. As we got towards the end of the chapter that Jan read, we find Naomi and Ruth arriving in Bethlehem. For Naomi, she was returning to a place that she knew well. She'd left it over 10 years ago, but she came back without husband, without sons, and deeply, deeply bitter. Ruth is arriving in this place for the first time, as far as we know. It's very unlikely she'd have been there before. She'd have heard about it, maybe, from Naomi and Elimelech and her husband. But she knew that the next chapter of her life was just in front of her. And I'm sure she must have been wondering what was going to happen when she turned the page. And the story tells us there was a lot of excitement as these two women ended their journey and walked into Bethlehem. Verse 19 tells us that the whole town was stirred, as the woman they had probably thought would never return after so long was suddenly back with a story to tell. And Ruth would have been caught up in all that commotion and excitement. So as those two people arrived, there was excitement, and people tried to find out what was going on. They were the center of attention. How different it was for two people, Mary and her husband Joseph, as they arrived in the same town hundreds of years later, with Mary very near to giving birth. Relatives may have welcomed them and given them somewhere to sleep, but a lot of people would have been coming and going, and these, Joseph and Mary, were just two travelers among many, being forced to go there because of a census imposed by foreign oppressors. So they would have been fairly unnoticed. But all that changed as the promise of the angel to Mary became true and her baby was born. The glory of God appeared in the sky. Angels appeared and proclaimed his birth. Shepherds rushed to see what had happened. Suddenly, this little town in this insignificant province of the Roman Empire was the center and focus of the entire universe, as God's Son came and lived among us as one of us in the person of Jesus. And the town is once again stirred, not this time because of the arrival of Naomi and Ruth, not even because of the arrival of Joseph and Mary, but because of the arrival of Jesus. When they had seen him, this is the shepherds heard the story. They came and they went and saw this baby who'd been born. When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told them about this child, and all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them. They went and told everybody they could find, and everyone who heard it was amazed. There was excitement. I probably first heard the story of Christmas just over 60 years ago. I know I don't look that old, but that's a long time ago. And I've heard about it, thought about it, spoken about it every year since. My challenge to me, and my challenge to each of us, is that we allow ourselves to be amazed once again. Amazed that there was a moment in history when God's Son came into the world, became one of us as he was born as a baby boy in Bethlehem. Yes, God had said it would happen. But it is an amazing thing. And in everything that will go on over the next few weeks, in the time we spend with family and friends, in the fun that we have, even in the dark times we walk through, let's keep this amazing truth at the center. That this baby boy, born in Bethlehem, was God coming into the world. And he came so that we could be welcomed into God's family. John, one of the gospel writers, talks about it like this. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed on his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Because of this baby who was born, because of Jesus, we have been offered an amazing right. Something that nobody can take from us. That if we are prepared to receive him, if we are prepared to believe in him, then we can enjoy this Christmas and the whole of life as God's children. If that is who you are, if you have experienced this transformation of becoming a child of God, this is something to rejoice in and celebrate this Christmas. If that is not yet who you are, it could be yours by simply believing in and receiving Jesus. That's what John says. And so it's not just that Jesus was born nearly just over 2,000 years ago. This is the gift that he offers again today for us to become children of God. Back to our story. Naomi and Ruth settle down in Bethlehem. They need to think about how they're going to support themselves. And as it's harvest time, Ruth offers to go into the fields and pick up leftover grain. We find this in verse 2 of the next chapter. This was a custom introduced in the law of Moses, where poor people in the land could come and take what had been left by the farm workers so they would have something to eat. And so they were told not to harvest right up to the corners of the field, but to leave a bit so there'd be food available for the poor people in the land. And she ended up working in a field belonging to a man called Boaz. He was a relative of her dead father-in-law, Elimelech. Boaz sees Ruth. He wants to understand a bit more about her. And we'll pick up this story from verse 5 in chapter 2, and Lynn is going to read it to us. There's Lynn. Great.
Ruth 2, starting at verse 5. Boaz asked the overseer of his harvesters, "Who does that young woman belong to?" The overseer replied, "She is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi." She said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters." She came into the field and has remained here from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter. So Boaz said to Ruth, "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting and follow along after the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you. And whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled." At this, she bowed down with her face to the ground. She asked him, "Why have I found such favour in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner?" Boaz replied, "I have been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. May I continue to find favour in your eyes, my Lord," she said. "You have put me at ease by speaking kindly to your servant, though I do not have the standing of one of your servants." At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come over here, have some bread and dip it in the wine vinegar." When she sat down with the harvesters, he offered her some roasted grain. She ate all she wanted and had some left over. As she got up to glean, Boaz gave orders to the men, "Let her gather among the sheaves and don't reprimand her. Even pull out some stalks for her from the bundles and leave them for her to pick up, and don't rebuke her." So Ruth gleaned in the field until evening. Then she threshed the barley she had gathered, and it amounted to an ephah. She carried it back to town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gathered. Ruth also brought out and gave her what she had left over after she had eaten enough. Her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." Then Ruth told her mother-in-law about the one at whose place she had been working. "The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz," she said. "The Lord bless him," Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. "He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead," she added. "This man is our close relative. He is one of our guardian redeemers."
Thank you, Lynn. As Lynn read through that story, it's clear that Boaz becomes more and more interested in Ruth and her story. He encourages her to continue working in his fields. He gives her food and water. He ensures she'll be protected and kept safe. He speaks about how impressed he's been with the way that she came back with Naomi. He calls for the blessing of God on her life. He's generous towards her, and this generosity enables Ruth to bless her mother-in-law as well. Something is going on. Naomi, when she hears about this, is aware of something that Ruth doesn't know. She knows something significant about Boaz, that as well as being a close relative, he was a guardian redeemer. And we'll see how that story works out in a few weeks when Heather picks up this story at the end of the month. But this morning, I just want to explore what this idea of a guardian redeemer is all about. And we first come across this idea of, at that point it was referred to as a near relative redeemer in Leviticus 25. So God is giving Moses some laws that will help the people to know how to live. And he says this: "If one of your fellow Israelites becomes poor and sells some of their property, their nearest relative is to come and redeem what they have sold." So there's the idea of someone becoming poor. They sell some land, sell maybe the house they're living in. Their nearest relative is expected to come and buy it back so they can have use of it again, and that land, that property, stays in the family. That was very important to the way they were going to live. But it also applies to people as well. There was the idea of what happened if a wealthy foreigner comes and lives among the people, an Israelite becomes poor and sells themselves to this wealthy foreigner. You wouldn't sell yourself to a wealthy Israelite because they weren't allowed to buy you. An uncle or a cousin or any blood relative may redeem them. And so it's written into the law that poor people who sell themselves as slaves can be brought out of that and regain their freedom with a relative acting for them. Yes, if they earn enough money, they can do it themselves. But in generally, it'd be a relative that would do it. But in Deuteronomy 25, this idea is expanded and developed. It's not just about property, it's not just about rescuing individuals, but it's about restoring family and preserving inheritance, things that were deeply important to the people of Israel at that time. And what we find is that if brothers are living and one of them dies without a son, his widow must not marry outside the family. Her husband's brother shall take her and marry her and fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to her. And the first son she bears shall carry the name of the dead brother, so that his name will not be blotted out from Israel. And further on in that chapter, there's some provision for people who don't want to do this, and that becomes important in this story of Ruth later on. And all of this will be in Naomi's mind when she speaks about Boaz being a guardian redeemer and the potential impact on her and Ruth. Will this be the way they can fully integrate back into the life of Bethlehem and the family they left behind? For it to work, it requires someone who is close to them, which Boaz is, and someone who's prepared and qualified to act on their behalf. Is Boaz going to do this? Is the question that we're left with at the end of this chapter. So this guardian redeemer was a really important concept in the way in which the people of God lived in the Old Testament. And as so often, these Old Testament concepts and pictures are played out fully and completely in the person and work of Jesus. Remember I said that there was a time when the angel appeared to Mary and spoke about the son she was going to have and said this: "The Holy Spirit will come on you, the power of the Most High will overshadow you. The Holy One to be born will be called the Son of God." This is God drawing close. This is God coming to be one of us. This is God choosing to come close, to enter directly into our challenges and situations and lives, just as Tim was sharing about earlier. And this is developed in the message of the angels to the shepherds as they hail the birth of the boy who had been promised. Today, in the town of David, a Saviour has been born to you. Someone who is going to save, someone who is going to redeem, someone who is going to draw people back into family relationship, not to a clan, not to a tribe, not even to a nation, but into family relationship with God himself. And whereas the role of the guardian redeemer in Old Testament times only applies to close relatives, the redemption and restoration that Jesus has to offer is for each and every person who has ever lived, is alive today, or will ever live. Paul picks this up. He explains this when he writes to the church in Galatia. When the set time had fully come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, so that we might receive adoption to sonship. The reason, says Paul, that God sent his Son into the world, the reason that Jesus was born, is that he could redeem and make adoption possible. Paul speaks about adoption to sonship, which was what was normally understood in his day, but it applies equally to women and to men. Redemption is about being brought back from, brought out of, a terrible and dangerous situation. And adoption is about being brought into a family with the exact same status and standing as one who had been naturally born into that family. It reminds us that without Jesus, we may think we're getting through life okay, but there is no way we can be forgiven by God for the wrong things we have done. But that in and with Jesus, we can be fully forgiven, completely set free, and brought into loving family relationship with Jesus and with God. This is the hope behind the Christmas story. And over this Advent period, we each have the opportunity to think about that, to respond to it, to receive the freedom and new life that Jesus came to bring. If we've never responded to Jesus and received what he generously and willingly offers, we have an opportunity to do that over this Christmas time. We have an opportunity to do that now. Or if we have responded to Jesus, but are feeling stuck and pressed down, maybe we need to receive his offer of fullness and his presence all over again. How are we going to respond to the amazing gift of God's Son this Advent and Christmas time? Let's take a few moments to think about that. I'll pray. We'll have one last song. And then if you'd like to respond to any of that, to explore any of that, please come and our prayer team will be here at the end of the service. There'll be an opportunity to come and share. And they'd love an opportunity to talk with you, to pray with you about responding to this or anything else that you would like to receive prayer for.